Dzień dobry. Good afternoon. The future of color referencing. By referencing, we mean acknowledging your source. And I'm going to adapt that to color in the entertainment industry. The practice of acknowledging your source that you use in your work. But I'm going to put a slightly different slant on it. How do you do this when your source has become irrelevant? My name's Dave Whitehouse. I'm a product development specialist with ROBE Lighting. And over the past 8 months, maybe a year, I've been looking at this topic, trying to get down to where we are going to go with color when we talk about color. Designers and programmers throughout the world, sorry, I'm picking up the fan there. Designers and programmers throughout the world talk about color. You know, when you're programming and they will say, give me 147 and just warm it up a touch. What is 147? What does it really refer to? The number is actually meaningless. It's just one of these, thousands of different colors. But everybody talks about a 147. So I want to have a look at that and look at it from the younger generation coming through into our industry. There are people at school and starting to study today that will have never used a piece of gel. As tungsten lamps start to disappear, they will have never used a tungsten lamp. So have things got to change in the way we reference color? What's familiar to us? You know, most people will have heard of a piece of gel, or a filter, whichever you prefer to call it. When these came out, they were revolutionary because you could put lots of different colors in. It was just a form of subtractive mixing. And of course, that has evolved to become CMY color flags, etc., etc. But the basis is subtractive. These things just filter out the light that don't make up the color that you want to see. And as a side note, one thing that really frustrates me is somebody will hold up that color, in front of a fluorescent light and say, yeah, that's the color I want, and then just say, okay, we're good to go. It has no relevance to what you're doing on a stage because you're not referencing your source. You're not thinking about what you're going to use this color in. So, we create color in two ways nowadays. We either do it through subtractive mixing, like CMY, or we do it through additive mixing, where you've got different color emitters within the fixture. Red, green, blue, amber lime, pink, magenta, cyan, whatever. Lots of different emitters, all putting in different amounts of light to make up the resultant color. So that's kind of the two ways we work. And that's where the problem starts to come in. Because how we create color has nothing to do with what that does. Yes, you get a resultant color, but that was all based on a source that's disappearing. Tungsten lamps, normally, they're going. You know, we might say, okay, we'll get another extension to the eco-design regulations and you can still obtain the lamps for another 5 years. But the lamp manufacturers are not going to make these lamps because they're not green, they don't last as long, they use more power, all those sorts of things. And of course, it's not profitable for them because everybody's moving over to LED, so we'll just stop making them anyway. So, has this system become irrelevant? And that's what we're really looking at. So let's have a look at what is familiar. Familiarity is the swatch book. Familiarity is what you will find on a console. Okay? We've got all these different colors. Yeah? How many people really use these colors? How many people are guided by the numbers? And we expect the desk to accurately reflect that color. But that color has a reference. It has been described by designers for years as, give me a Lee 103. But that number 103 means nothing. And as somebody coming into the industry, are they expected to learn 700 different colors that Lee manufacture in a system that makes no sense to anybody? You know, you think, okay, there might be a clue in the description of the color, which we'll talk about in a minute. So you've got your console, you've got a choice of going to a particular manufacturer. That's if the manufacturers of the consoles aren't arguing with the manufacturers of the color about copyrights and things like that, which is a whole different story. So we get to use these numbers, but these numbers and descriptions do not quite make sense. It's an easy reference for an experienced person because a programmer will know, okay, if I press that button, I'm going to get a Lee, whatever, 147. Okay? A designer will talk about, yeah, okay, I want a 147, but I want to warm it up. But for an outsider entering the industry, it means nothing. It's because we hang on to it, because we have grown up with it. But there's a key element that's missing. We find, and in the research I've done, literally thousands of interviews, that these type of color pickers are used less and less. Top designers make up their own color palettes. They sit with their programmer and create their own colors. They use this as a basis to work from, but they create their own color. So we've got these colors. They've all got numbers and they've got names. We've said these numbers are irrelevant. The descriptions are even worse. You tell me what a bastard amber is. Yeah, I'm going to get up, if I'm a newcomer and somebody calls me a bastard, I'm going to hit them. The descriptions are really meaningless. So we've got this system that we've become used to, but is it the right system for the future? I don't know the answer, and I'm going to be upfront now. I do not know the answer to this question. All of the colors are based on a reference source. So in my time drilling down into this, what are these colors based on? In other words, they've put a color into a fixture with a light source, shone the light through, they've come out with a color that they give a name to and a number to, and they'll give you a nanometer description of the gamut of what is coming through that particular fixture. Okay, and herein lies the problem. That source that they're using as a reference source will no longer exist. People will not have been exposed to using different types of tungsten lamp. And all these color libraries and everything else are based primarily around tungsten. But our fixtures are not just used in theatre with tungsten lamps. So again, there's a bit of irrelevance there. So what is a reference source for a filter? 2,700 Kelvin, 6,500 Kelvin, a 1 kilowatt tungsten source. They'll all give you a different output. They'll all give you a different looking color. But we all talk about that color as being right or wrong, and that's a whole different subject, which we'll mention in a minute. They're all different, so how can a designer say, oh, give me 136? And then he says, that doesn't look like 136, because he's used to looking at color using a particular type of fixture. Whereas a newer person in the theatre will absolutely accept that that profile with its 7 colors produces a color, and in his mind, that is 136. But that 136 looks different to the tungsten 136. So the reference source is totally different. And new people coming in the industry will not understand how these different colors are given the same name. It's complicated. So when you start drilling down into this, it gets really interesting. If you look at the different manufacturers of, and this is not having a go at manufacturers, because I've discussed this with all of them. They describe their color library or their gels as based on an incandescent source. That can be anything from a 500-watt old original T1 lamp to a 2.5 kilowatt tungsten lamp. And when that is shone through the color filter, of course it looks different because they've all got different intensities. And some of them have got different color temperatures. One manufacturer uses a 1 kilowatt R7S. You know the strip lamp, the common old floodlight? That is their reference source at 3,200 Kelvin. Is it a new lamp? Has the color temperature actually changed totally and it's now down to 2,600 Kelvin, but they keep getting the same old unit out of the cupboard because that's their reference source? There is another manufacturer who uses a 1 kilowatt tungsten source. And one manufacturer who uses a 575 watt long life HPL lamp. Again, different color temperature. But we all accept, back of our minds, they're working off the same source. And of course, as I said, these sources in particular are going to disappear. So how does somebody who's entered the industry, never used these sources, relate it to the color they want on the stage? It's a difficult problem. And of course, as we get older and get really old like me, our eyesight's useless anyway, so it all starts to look the same. With these reference sources, theatre people will say, I want it to look like a 750 watt source 4. Chances are. That's a common perception. But not one of those companies I listed use that as a reference source. So the colour is going to appear to be different. Live entertainment will use 3,200 Kelvin, but they're also going to use discharge lamp levels at 6,600, 6,700 Kelvin. Okay, taken from the old discharge lamps, now we're on to high-performance LED lamps. Different color temperature. You put a filter in front of that, it's going to look totally different with the light coming out. But then they still talk about the same 132 blue as a theatre lighting designer would, using a totally different source. So there's a lot of misconceptions going on in the background of how these colors actually work. In the film world, they'll use a 2K Fresnel, but they'll also use a cold light. They'll go out to a discharge lamp. So again, the source that they're using does not really relate to what the color is and what it says you will get out at the end. It's only relating to this. And if you try and do a color balance on stage or in the studio, your color's going to be way out. So there's a lot of things in these reference sources that don't make sense. And that's where it became really confusing for me, because I'd never really thought about this. We all talk about color as being, oh, it's that color or that color, but we never think what is behind it. And what is behind it is a source that we will no longer use. It's dead. It's going to go away. So what happens in the future? How do we talk about and reference color? And of course, you've got the problem that designers never agree. You could take 5 different lighting designers in the same room and they would all come up with a different answer to what a 127 gel looks like, because they're all trying to reference it differently. It's very seldom designers agree. Here's something taken from Opera de Paris. Okay, it's their color scrollers, 1 and 2K tungstens. Yeah, and those are the colors they put in, and that's what they expect to see. But look, there's a 4K HMI there. There's a 2.5K HMI there. They're not going to give you the same as the swatch book, even when you call it on your desk, because the source is different, because it's got a different Kelvin rating. So it produces a different light. So you can see how confusing this can be for somebody who's entering the industry now. And surely education on color has got to modernize. It's got to change. One thing we all agree on is color comes from in the gamut. So a fixture can only create certain color. Yeah? That gamut size, where all the colors contained, will vary from fixture to fixture. If it's got 5 colors in it, it'll have a greater range than a 4 color. So again, that's different. But surely you shouldn't be referencing numbers that mean nothing. You should, in theory, on a console, be able to call that fixture up, whatever manufacturer it is, and say, right, there's the gamut for that particular fixture. I will select that color. And then with AI, say, right, make it warmer, make it cooler, make it bluer, make it pinker, make it redder. No, we've got to fiddle around here. Why can't we just talk to the console? When the fixture's in standalone mode, why can't we just talk to the fixture? AI is incredibly powerful and could be used to get rid of that. The gel manufacturers, when I walk out of here, are going to absolutely hate me for this. But we need to modernize the way we work. And with the new generation coming through, they will have no experience of light sources we take for granted. And I think that's the most important thing here. The challenges are the basis of these references. How can we use a reference to a color if it no longer exists? That makes no sense. We're tied to disappearing sources. All the manufacturers use a form of tungsten lamp as a reference, except one who gives 2 different reference sources. Okay? So the majority are tied to a disappearing source. The reference numbers are purely numbers. Nothing else exists. So we've got this thing now where there's a generation that's never used tungsten, okay? And they'll be coming into our industry within the next few years. They have nothing to relate to. Can AI help them? Can AI help learning color to make it easier for them? Or have they got to go and learn 706 different numbers and what they mean? What should color be related to? What should be the reference source? I haven't got an answer to it, but it surely can't be a technology that has disappeared, because then it's not relatable. Gamut pickers related to source, we've just spoken about, and we're tied to a particular reference source. We shouldn't be. We should be able to input what we want that source to be. So there's a lot of things going on. Are we just too traditional in the way we talk and reference about color? Is it older people like myself trying to hold on to this method because knowledge is power? And because we don't want to advance it, we're comfortable with the way it is. Do we need to advance it? Does it need to change? Am I talking utter rubbish? I might be. But having spent the last year going into this, is there really a problem? Is there a problem the way we talk about color? So should we just scrap color references? The GDTF data contains all the raw data you need. So the data, whatever source you take it from, is available. Why did I ask this? I asked this because I was doing research on color libraries. Okay? And it was only then when I really started to drill down into what they meant by a reference source. They were all different. So they're going to give different results. So one person's interpretation of what a 117 steel blue looks like is going to be different to what another person calls a 117, because it depends on what you're referencing it to. It's been a long basis investigating this, and a lot of programmers and designers don't use the onboard color libraries. But it's those people starting to enter our industry who do, because they don't know these colors, and they'll look at it and they'll say, okay, I know 132 is blue, and they'll do that. But surely there's got to be a better way than just picking a number out of 700 different numbers. Next time you're working in the theatre, put yourself in a youngster's position when he comes into the industry, trying to learn about colour. He will understand all the colour theory, but when he tries to apply it on a stage, there is a whole other layer that he has to learn. Is it a rite of passage? Is it what they should be doing? I'd really be interested to hear your thoughts on it. I'd really like to have a chat to people afterwards. I find it fascinating. We're going through it as a company, looking at colour libraries and the way colour is described and generated. So it's a question. I have no answer to it. I think it's a fascinating question of how we're going to encourage the next generation of designers and programmers to enter our industry, to take down these barriers of really old ways of talking about colour in light. If you've got an answer, please speak to me afterwards. I'm sorry for the interruption. It was beyond my control, but thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for staying here. I do appreciate it. Thank you.